Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I feel like this is deja vu all over again, so many times standing here and talking about this issue. And after the previous speaker just speaking, I want to remind you, we are talking about the conventional, the small producers, the conventional well industry, not the Marcellus. The small conventional wells in this state. We are not addressing Marcellus wells. This is an industry, members, that is sat down numerous times with members of this body, specifically more in the Northwest, on site, going to conventional well sites, which you are probably not even familiar with in the southeast part of the state. I know you're not familiar in the Delaware Basin, even of Marcellus, because you have a moratorium on drilling. This bill is about our conventional producers. These producers have sat at the table since the council was voted on by this body to come up with regulations specific for the conventional well industry, separate from the Marcellus industry. Folks, I come from Warren County, just about 35 miles from Drake Well, which is, by the way, the well is still there. And guess what? It's a state park with a state museum. And the well is still in production. It still works. You can go there, and we have a state park, Drake Well. I encourage you all to visit the Northwest and go to the first oil well in the United States and in the world. And along with that oil well is the first oil refinery, also in the Northwest, in Bradford, that was very instrumental in providing oil products that we used during World War II when we fought the horrible terror of a regime. And we were obviously the victors thanks to that oil refinery in Bradford, PA. The Titusville well, Drake Well, at the time it was said, this is the well that saved the whale. For all of you who are not familiar with Titusville or what was going on before 1859, we were using whale oil in the United States to light everything from street lights into lights in our home. That's why it is said that this is the well that saved the whale. Mr. Speaker, I've also heard today a phrase, clean up your mess. Now, Mr. Speaker, in my county, I've been honored to have two bodies of water, rivers, one a creek, one a river, named River of the Year. One is the Conowongo Creek, which right in the midst of the oil patch, conventional wells, and the Allegheny River. And you know, Mr. Speaker, my county has also been home to the National Canoe Race. We have a livery in Warren County. We don't depend on the government for everything we do to clean up messes, because I've heard there's a really awful creek down in southeast PA that really could use a lot of work and maybe a lot of volunteers to clean up that creek. We have a lot of volunteers, Mr. Speaker, who go into that creek and that river every single year to clean up those bodies of water. And I would suggest that maybe that's what needs to happen in the southeast and other parts of the state. Don't just rely on government. Get volunteers to clean up your mess. Mr. Speaker, I know I am passionate about this subject. I have many businessmen and women who are owners of the conventional oil and gas wells. They are school board directors. They are our firemen. They are volunteers. They are members of our communities who contribute to our communities, to our schools, to our churches, to our organizations. They are a big part of our economy in Northwest Pennsylvania. And Mr. Speaker, I know the environment seems to be the #1 issue in the Southeast, but you know what? It's also a big issue in the Northwest and with our conventional producers. And public resources remain powerfully protected in the conventional industry context of this bill. It sets forth specific consideration of threatened and endangered species. The other public resources listed in the Oil and Gas Act of 1984 continue to be protected under the relevant statutes and regulations for those resources. The well permit process set forth in this bill does not alter or reduce operator obligations under those laws. Again, Mr. Speaker, the Allegheny National Forest is home to 12,000 of Pennsylvania's 120,000 conventional wells, and it is the ideal laboratory to study the impact of conventional operations on water quality. Of the 2,126 miles of mapped streams within the Allegheny National Forest, the proclamation boundary, an area of 720,000 acres, 72% are rated as high quality or exceptional value for water quality. Moreover, in its 2000 study, the Forest Service characterized the water quality in the ANF as among the highest in the state. In November of 2014, the Allegheny National Forest released a study undertaken by Clarion University to compare the results of oil and gas development on benthic macrovertebrate communities in a high development watershed as compared to a very low to no development watershed. The report concluded that these studies did not detect a negative impact to water quality from the conventional well development. Mr. Speaker, I could go on and on, regarding some of the reports. But I'm here to say that the meetings with DEP, when they say they haven't been at the table and have any input into this bill, it is completely false. DEP has been on the ground in northwestern Pennsylvania. They have had input on the advisory council. They have met with our producers. They've been on well sites. We've had hearings. We've had extensive meetings, and they've had extensive meetings on this council. They've had input into the bill, and some of these changes that were incorporated are these: extending the permit time for allowable activity from 1 to 3 years, a best management practice that allows locations to better stabilize before activity, thus reducing erosion and sedimentation. Providing for an area of review for identifying and monitoring abandoned and orphan wells during hydraulic fracking. Streamlining the Good Samaritan provisions for application to well plugging to incentivize the industry operators to voluntarily plug orphan wells. options for orphan well adoption and permitting, grant funding or permit fee relief to a volunteer who plugs an orphan well, eliminates need for DEP to redundantly advance new conventional regulations through both the Technical Advisory Board and the Pennsylvania Grade Crew Development Advisory Council. Mr. Speaker, this is a vital, vital industry to the Northwestern and the oil patch region. We need these regulations. We need regulations to be fair. Our producers are not opposed to regulations, which is why, Mr. Speaker, we have this bill in front of us. But we want fair regulations, not the same regulations for the big Marcellus guys, but we want fair regulations for the conventional well industry. An industry, by the way, that during one of the worst winters we've had as far as the temperatures has kept our homes warm. I was very thankful every single day when at my house it was 0 degrees for 2 weeks. My house was warm. Thank you to the producers of oil and gas that kept my house warm during that cold spell, allowed me to cook on a gas stove, and allowed me to feed my family and stay in a warm home during this cold winter months. And Mr. Speaker, this will be the last thing I would address, is all of the products, even before the Marcellus wells, that have been produced because of the conventional and oil gas producers, including, Mr. Speaker, when you go to the Hunger Garden, there's a whole lot of plastic and plastic pipelines in that Hunger Garden. You can thank the oil and gas producers, Mr. Speaker.
Please suspend. We do have 2 more speakers. We have 2 more speakers. Representative Rapp, I know you're about ready to conclude. We have Representative Ryan and Representative Causer. 2 more speakers, and then we'll be proceeding to the vote.
I know that I have shared some of this list before, but I think it's worth repeating, Mr. Speaker. I see an awful lot of water bottles on those desks, every desk. Those water bottles are production and from the resources of oil and gas, your computers, your iPhones, your vitamin capsules, your putty that you use, nylon rope, water pipes, heart valves, fan belts, ink, dice. I'm sure our casinos are happy to have the oil and gas industry so they can have their dice at their casinos. The list goes on, and it's all because of an industry that started right here in Pennsylvania, in Titusville, PA, with a refinery in Bradford. This industry continues, willing to be regulated, but Mr. Speaker, we are looking for fair regulations, which what this bill is all about, and I request your affirmative vote on this House bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.